All right, welcome back everyone. My name's Arthur Ritchie. I'm here on behalf of my company, Birkins, Ritchie and Associates, and this is the supervisory session for the Drug-Free Safety Program. Now, occasionally events take place that impact the way that we do our jobs. And recently, there was a big change that happened with OSHA and their finding schedule. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of this. Any of you have any interaction with OSHA at all? All right. Well, generally, and again, let me preface this by saying I'm not an OSHA approved instructor. I don't teach OSHA courses, but sometimes the topics that I do teach kind of brush up against the OSHA stuff, and this is one of those instances. As far as in my very limited knowledge of OSHA regs, going back about 25 years, and certainly as long as I've been conducting these safety training courses, it's been my understanding that if an OSHA inspector shows up on your job site, it's generally for one of three different situations. Either A, there's been a catastrophic event, somebody's been hurt or killed and they're there to inspect, they're there to investigate. B, someone has made an anonymous tip to OSHA and they've come out to investigate that tip to see if there's actually a safety problem there or not. Or C, there was you're on a job site with multiple contractors and one of those other contractors has something that's unsafe and they're there to investigate it. They just happen to notice something that's going on with one of your workers. In any of those situations, A, B, or C, if that OSHA inspector is on your job site and they notice that there is an obvious violation of an established OSHA work rule, or if if your workers are behaving in such a way that they're creating an obvious hazard to themselves or the other workers, then that OSHA inspector is imbued with considerable authority. They have the authority to issue a stop work order. They can create a punch list of corrective actions that need to be taken in order to resume duties, and they can start levying fines. And going back 25 years, their finding schedule had remained unchanged. It had been $7,000 on the low end if you have what's determined to be a willful violation, $7,000 on the low end, all the way up to $70,000 on the high end, depending on the severity of the violation. So, just for instance, if that inspector came out and they found what they determined to be 8 severe willful violations, you could walk away from there with a bill for over $500,000 with one visit. And for a lot of contractors, that'd be enough to shut their doors. Last summer, that changed. On August 28th, 2016, that finding schedule was changed, and OSHA implemented what they called an inflationary adjustment to that finding schedule. That for 25 years had not been changed, and so they factored in all of those inflationary adjustments and they implemented them at once. And so on the low end, that's the finding schedule that used to be $7,000 went up to $12,800, and on the high end, the $70,000 high end fine went up to $128,000. So now, if that OSHA inspector found those same 8 severe willful violations, that you could walk away with a tab for over $1 million. Okay. Now, I know, like I said, I don't know a ton about OSHA regulations, but I do try to stay open to different situations when the universe puts them in my path. And last summer, when all of this was being rolled out, it just happened to coincide with the passage of the medical marijuana law in Ohio, and our company had been asked to go around the state with the different safety council presentations and explain what was coming with what was likely coming with the new medical marijuana regulations. And at one of those presentations, I actually was seated with an OSHA representative who was there to discuss this, this enhanced finding schedule. And I took advantage of that opportunity, and I asked him some questions about the OSHA rules because I didn't know a whole ton about it. And I asked why there were, how it was possible to keep all those OSHA rules straight. There's over 5,500 of them, I believe, and I just can't imagine anybody keeping all those different regs, straight in their head. And and I asked him how a safety violation or safety hazard became an OSHA rule. And he was actually a really nice guy. He had a very compelling story. He said the reason he became an OSHA inspector was because his family member was killed in an industrial accident. He wanted to protect other families from having to go through what his family went through, which was pretty laudable. But he said that as many OSHA work rules as there are, that there could be infinitely more. That there's actually a formula by which a hazard becomes a work rule. The OSHA representative said it would not be desirable, nor would it be feasible to create an OSHA work rule for every eventuality in the workplace. It would actually be it would be paralyzing for contractors. They'd be so busy trying not to violate a rule that they couldn't get anything done. He said, so in order to keep the number of those work rules, what he called manageable, they created a catch-all work rule called OSHA's General Duty Class. And to paraphrase the General Duty Class, what this catch-all rule says is that they expect contractors to be experts in their industries and to know where the hazards are. And so it said that the OSHA work rule, or the OSHA General Duty Class, says for employers that they are responsible for providing a safe work environment that's free from identified hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious injury. And that if they become aware of such a hazard, that they're responsible for taking immediate appropriate corrective action to prevent people from getting hurt or killed. All right? This is the catch-all rule. And so if they, even if a contractor isn't violating an established OSHA work rule per se, if there is some identified hazard that this inspector sees, then they can be cited under this General Duty Class. They can still be cited, they can still be fined. All right. So say for example, as a contractor, you're called out to go to a job site to perform some duty. You're directed to park in a particular parking lot and to enter through a particular man door. So when you arrive, you pull into the parking area, you're all grouping together and commiserating, and as you're about to enter the building, you notice that the big storm that blew through last night knocked down a power line. And the power line is lying across your pathway into the building. Now it's arcing, it's sparking, it's still a live wire. In your minds, would that constitute a safety hazard that is causing or likely to cause death or harm? Of course, right? All right, so that's a situation where you want to take immediate, you want to do whatever you have to do to keep the situation safe. You maybe create take tape and make a perimeter. You want to contact the utility company. You want to notify the customer that you've got this hazard and direct people to go through a different entrance. Whatever you have to do to keep people safe, pretty easy peasy, right? All right. How about this? How about you have at the beginning of your shift, your folks show up. You call them together to go over the marching orders for the day, and when you're giving your instructions for the day, you notice that one of your workers appears to be showing indicators of impairment, that they appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. In your mind, does that constitute a safety hazard that's causing or likely to cause death or harm? Absolutely, right? Yeah, and it should. And it's really important that we label it as such. Those labels have value. And if we label this as a concrete hazard, then you're going to be more likely to take action. If you label it with ambivalence, if you label it in a wishy-washy way, then you're going to be less likely to take action. Say, I don't know, maybe, it depends. It's important that we always do. There are different barriers to action that stop us as supervisors from taking those actions. And sometimes, and the largest barrier that we're going to address today is not being sure what to do. And so through this training today, I want to make sure that you have those steps in place, so if you run into one of these situations, you know specifically what to do. And hopefully that will take away that barrier. One of the other common barriers is worrying about getting the job done. It's a little bit of self-interest. The supervisors worry that if I slow things down right now and address this, that it's going to put me behind schedule. Right now, raise your hand if you don't have enough to do. Okay. In the more than 100 sessions that I've taught with supervisors this year alone, I have not seen a single hand be raised when I ask that question. Most of us have such a to-do list that if we could pack in 2 days in one, we still wouldn't get everything done. So when you come across an impaired worker and you think, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. I've got to do this, this, and this. Now I got to stop what I'm doing and confront this person and pull them aside, maybe transport them, And so sometimes in our head we start playing through scenarios, wondering if maybe this is one of those situations where maybe we can turn a blind eye, maybe we can take some mitigating actions to maybe put the person in a little bit of a less dangerous assignment, maybe, and I understand sometimes those scenarios playing through our head. But I want to throw out another conversation for you that I believe will be valuable for you. Last summer, I was asked at the last minute to sit in for a friend of mine who was facilitating a meeting at the Crisis Center in Stark County. Every Thursday they offer a meeting for the folks who are being released back into the community, who have gone through detox. They have they put together what they call a safety action plan. So when they leave, they don't just go right back into the same situation and relapse right away. They know where they're going to a safe place. Are they going to put some protective factors in place? It's really a good program. But I got asked at the last minute if I could plug in for a friend of mine because his mother was in the hospital. So I stepped in. I said sure. It was like 10 minutes from my house. I arrived for the meeting, and I got there early. And it just so happened the other person who was facilitating the meeting with me was a high-powered attorney. And so he was a perfect person to ask a question that I had bouncing around my head for some time. If a supervisor in a safety-sensitive work environment is on shift and a catastrophic accident occurs where somebody is killed or badly injured, and it's determined that the accident that occurred was the result of that supervisor's negligence, can the supervisor be held personally liable? Any guesses what the attorney said to me?
Yes.
Okay, how many of you would say yes? Okay, how many of you would say no? We got no no's, all right? I got to tell you, I would have guessed yes also. I was right along with you. But surprisingly, the attorney said no, probably not. The corporation is responsible for putting a competent person on shift. So if they put that supervisor on shift, even if the supervisor was bad at their job, even if they were paying attention to this when they should be paying attention to this, even if they were doing this when they should have been doing that, even if they were incredibly incompetent, it was still the responsibility of the corporation to put the competent person there in the first place. So if it's just determined to be that it was the result of incompetence or negligence on the part of the supervisor, then the corporation is probably still going to be solely responsible and the corporate veil would not be pierced. He said, however, there is one caveat that can change that. There is one qualifying factor that would change that. He said, if it can be proven, he said, and it's very difficult for a court of law to prove this, but if it can be proven that the supervisor was aware of this hazard, and that the supervisor proceeded in a deliberately, willfully reckless manner, led to that catastrophic accident where that person was severely injured or killed, then in a situation like that, then that corporate veil may be torn. And that supervisor may be exposed to liability. And their personal assets may be exposed as well. When I'm talking about a supervisor's personal assets being exposed, what am I talking about?
House, bank accounts, everything.
House, bank accounts, everything. And the attorney said something to me that actually gave me a little bit of a shudder. He said that his law firm would go after everything that supervisor cared enough to document and insure. Heirlooms, collectibles, everything. Because in his mind he said if that supervisor's made that willful, reckless decision and that resulted in his client losing everything, he wanted to take everything from him as well. So in that moment, when that's going through that, when that supervisor, when it's going through their mind about, wait, well, maybe I don't want to hold this person accountable. In that moment, what they're doing is placing a bet. They're taking everything they've ever worked for, putting it on the table, they're pushing it out there, and they're rolling the dice. And they're gambling that today won't be the day when that impaired worker hurts or kills themselves or somebody else. My question for that supervisor would be, do you feel lucky? And I think if just realistically, if any of us take just one step backwards and think about it, is it ever worth taking that chance? Is it ever worth risking everything you've ever worked for the sake of expediency? I think most of us would agree, no, it's not. So, today what I want to just touch base on with you is some of the most basic expectations for supervisors in a drug-free workplace, in a safety-sensitive workplace. And then we'll go over precisely how to respond to a situation in which you suspect a worker of being too impaired to safely perform their duties. The first point that I want to just remind you about is your obligation as a gatekeeper in a drug-free workplace. It's your responsibility to make sure that as a frontline supervisor that no impaired workers get past you. Because think about it, if that heavily impaired worker gets past you and is able to get onto the job site and perform their duties, what's standing between them and the catastrophic event that's waiting for them? If that impaired worker is allowed to get past you and to, start performing their duties, get onto the job site, what's standing between them and that catastrophic event? Nothing, right? So it's important that that you understand your role, that you understand what to do with this. All right? So there are guidelines for supervisors in a drug-free workplace, and when it is that you are required to intervene with a worker you believe to be impaired. And under the Code of Federal Regulations, it says that in order for a supervisor to refer a subordinate for a reasonable suspicion drug test, that certainty is not required. You don't have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't have to be a slam dunk. You don't have to be 100% sure. And that's because if certainty was the standard, if you were uncertain, then that would prevent you from being able to hold them accountable. All right? On the other hand, though, just a vague gut feeling, just a mere hunch, is not sufficient to make a referral. So you can't say, oh, Tony didn't seem right to me today, let's send him off for a drug screen. There's got to be more than that. All right? So certainty is not required, a mere hunch is not sufficient. According to the Code of Federal Regulations, it says in order for a supervisor in a safety-sensitive, drug-free workplace to make a referral for reasonable suspicion testing, that you must be able to verbalize and articulate why it is, based on your direct observation of that worker, that you believe that that worker is too impaired to safely perform their duties. You must be able to verbalize and articulate why it is you believe they're too impaired to safely perform their duties. You got to be able to put it into words. Bottom line, if you can't say it, you can't send them. You got to be able to put it into words. All right. Now, is that a very high bar that you have to meet? No, not really, right? You just got to be able to put it in words, but it is a bar, and you have to be able to step over. All right. So the million-dollar question that I generally receive is, okay, well, how do we arrive at those words? Well, fortunately for you, the federal government has given us a 6-step constructive confrontation process that we can follow to arrive at those words. The 6-step constructive confrontation process is determined to be the gold standard. This is considered to be operating in good faith. If you follow this 6-step protocol, It's going to put you and your company in the best position to defend the decisions that you make and the actions that you take. So in the remaining time that we have for this session today, I want to go over the 6-step process with you. Okay, is that a good idea? All right. All right, now the first step in the process is to observe. In order to observe, you want to be present and you want to pay attention. And this is never more important than at the beginning of each shift. Most employees who violate this policy are going to do so when they arrive for work. Not necessarily because they decided to wake up that morning and start drinking or taking drugs, although sometimes they do. I recently had a roofer who told me, of course he smokes weed in the morning. It's a long time till lunch, you know. But generally, it's going to be because the person is still impaired from the night before. So let me ask this question. If you have a worker who's on shift, who is showing signs of impairment, but you're confident that they didn't stop drinking 5 minutes ago, that they are still just showing signs of impairment because they stopped 5 hours ago, does that make a difference? No, right? Because the operative word is they are still showing signs of impairment, right? So if they're too impaired to be there, it doesn't matter what's causing the impairment. And we'll come back to this in a little bit with indicators, but that's a big part of this, that if they're showing signs of impairment, then it's your responsibility to implement this protocol. All right? So you want to be present, you want to pay attention, and what I'm reinforcing this year when I'm going around and offering these courses is I want to ask supervisors who are on shift to commit to engaging with their workers at the beginning of each shift. All right, when I'm talking about engaging, I'm talking about having at least a brief, deliberate, focused interaction with those workers. And in order to facilitate that engagement, I'm going to offer 3 very simple questions that any supervisor can ask of any subordinate. All right? The first question is going to be, are you crystal clear about what I need for you to accomplish on this shift today? Are you crystal clear about what I need for you to accomplish on this shift today? Question 2. Do you have the supplies and equipment necessary to accomplish the tasks that I've assigned you? And question 3 would be, is there anything that we have not discussed that would prevent you from completing the tasks that you've been assigned? Is there anything that we have not discussed that would prevent you from completing the tasks that you've been assigned? Is there anything inflammatory about any of those questions? Anything that's going to get the person, you know, make them fly off the handle or anything? You know, probably not, right? Unless they're already dangerously deranged or something, it's a whole different issue. But that's, we have EAP services for that. But how many of you are already asking some version of those questions anyway? It's just good management, right? Management 101. You know, this is what I need you to do. Do you have what you need to get it done? Anything that would stop you? Okay, great, break. It's just a good practice. It's good communication. But more importantly, it gives you that opportunity when you're engaging to check the employee out and to see if they appear to be fit for duty. And if something that you're seeing in that worker leads you to believe they may not be fit for duty, then it's important that you slow things down and look into it to see if something's wrong. All right. How many of you would say that you know your workers well enough that if something's wrong that you ask them if they're okay?
Could you repeat that question?
How many of you know your workers well enough that if something appears to be wrong, you can ask them if they're okay? All right. When's the last time you've asked somebody at work if they were all right?
All the time.
Okay. I mean, and that's a great answer. I mean, and it's kind of a gut check kind of question. If you don't know your workers that well, it may be an opportunity for you to step things up a little bit to get to know them better. Because if you don't know what's normal for them, you won't know what's abnormal for them. So it's important that you know. One other piece of this, with the observing, it's important that you don't allow yourself to get focused into tunnel vision. Sometimes we have so much going on that we just focus on the task that's immediately in front of our face, and we miss what's going on around us. And as a supervisor in a drug-free workplace, as a supervisor in a safety-sensitive work environment, you want to be able to kind of have your head on a swivel so you can get your task done and look around so that if anything's going on, you can catch it, and it's a skill that you can develop. once you've observed, if you notice that something appears to be wrong, then it's important that you do check into it to see if something actually is wrong. And that takes us to step 2, that's investigating. Now, when you are to investigate simply means to look into a situation. It doesn't have to be a big involved process. Sometimes it just means giving it a double take. You think something appears to be wrong, you look at it, you realize it's not, okay, you've investigated. Sometimes it requires something more thorough. What we recommend for our supervisors is the utilization of a 5-point fitness for duty inspection. And the 5-point fitness for duty inspection involves looking for different indicators of impairment: eyes, odors, speech, coordination, and other obvious signs. Okay? Eyes, odors, speech, coordination, and other obvious signs. Now, in order to keep this simple and so that it's easily accessible and make it so that you can remember it easily, I'm going to give you a little trick that you can put in your pocket and take with you. All right? And in order to do this with you, though, in order to give you the short version that you requested, you're going to have to use your imaginations a little bit. Okay? Can everybody use their imaginations with me? All right? Put on your imagination caps. All right. What I want you to imagine is that you have a friend who is known to drink a little bit more alcohol than the average person. Maybe this friend is known to drink a little bit more alcohol than the average dozen people. All right? Can you all imagine that person in your mind? Now imagine this friend who tends to over-imbibe, has a camper out at the lake. And this friend who tends to drink too much likes to go out to take off on weekends to go out to his camper to do fishing, but he rarely packs his gear. You know, what he does pack, though, is cases and cases of booze, cases and cases of beer, lots of bottles of booze. He goes out there and he just drinks himself into oblivion every so often. And so this friend of yours who likes to overindulge has been at the camper. He went out Thursday night. He's been drinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. He woke up, and to switch things up a little bit, instead of drinking beer, he made himself some Bloody Marys. And now he's packed up his stuff and he's heading back home. And it just so happens that his path home from the lake goes right past your home. Right? So you're sitting at home on Sunday afternoon doing whatever you do. For me, it would be watching the Tribe, probably, or watching a ball game. You know, and as you're watching the ball game on TV, suddenly the dog starts barking wildly. You go to your front door and you open your front door, and there on the other side of your screen door stands your inebriated friend. How long would it take you to figure out that your friend was in bad shape?
Second. 1 minute.
A second? How long, sir, do you think?
Pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly, right? A couple moment, you know, not very long. Anybody you think would take much longer than that? And so what are some indicators that would let you know, that would tip you off that he may not be in the best shape?
Slurred speech.
Okay, so with speech, all right. So the slurred speech. You know what? If we were playing the Family Feud, that would probably be, you know, the number one answer, right? Survey says slurred speech. You know, very, very common answer. Yes. Slurred speech. What else about speech might tip you off?
Loud.
Okay, maybe the volume being cranked way up. What else?
Regarding speech.
Yeah, regarding speech.
Other than slurred.
Yeah, slurred, loud. Anything else?
Doesn't make sense.
Okay, maybe some crazy topics, just talking wildly, babbling. You know, maybe turning the volume way down, so they're mumbling so quietly you can't hear them. Maybe they're saying vulgar or inappropriate things that they wouldn't normally say. Maybe they're not able to come up, not able to complete their thoughts, just like I just did. They're not able to complete their thoughts. Maybe they're incoherent. Lots of things with the speech that could tip you off, right? What else? What are some other indicators that may tip you off?
Smell.
Okay, maybe the odors, right? The sense of the smell. What are some odors that may tip you off?
A beer is really strong.
Sure, the strong odor of beer, strong odor of liquor. Anything else?
Glassy eyes.
Oh, let's stick with odors for a second. You're an advanced student. You're just one step ahead of me.
With alcohol stuff?
Yeah, or maybe other than alcohol. What are some other odors that may jump out at you?
The smell of marijuana.
Maybe the smell of marijuana smoke. Maybe he's out there drinking some booze and smoking some Mother Nature, some left-handed cigarettes or something. Maybe some body odor. A lot of times, he's out there, not taking good care of himself. Maybe it's really, pretty ripe. We had a supervisor for a retail store a few years back who had some college students who came home to work for her, and they took her out to the local bars drinking and just drank her under the table. And they took her and sat her in her car outside of where she worked. It was the summertime. It was really hot. She woke up from being so hot and realized she had about 15 minutes to go into work. So she reported for work retail in the same clothes she wore the day before, wrinkled and everything. She pulled her hair back in a pony. Unbeknownst to her, she still had chunks of vomit in her hair. And so she, before long, she was confronted by the store manager and had to come in and see us for EAP. Okay, that could be an odor certainly that could tip you off. Okay. Any other indicators besides the odors in the speech? Eyes. Okay, what are some things about the eyes that would tip you off?
Bloodshot.
Sure, bloodshot eyes. Again, if we were playing the feud, that would have to be the number 2 answer. It would be a very, very, very common answer. Indeed, sir. Red, glassy, bloodshot eyes. But let me ask you this. How many of you have lived your entire lives here in the Midwest? Okay. If you have, are red, glassy, bloodshot eyes a slam dunk the person's been using booze or drugs?
Yeah.
No, right? It could be allergies, right? It could be hay fever, it could be emotional distress, it could be fatigue, it could be contacts, it could be swimming in chlorinated water, it could be lots and lots of things, right? So this is an important part. If you're writing anything down, this is an important point to write down. That as a supervisor in a drug-free workplace or in a safety-sensitive work environment, you are not responsible for diagnosing precisely what's causing the impairment with your worker. You're just responsible for recognizing the signs of impairment and pulling the person off duty before they hurt themselves or someone else. You don't have to grow a goatee and start wearing a little beret, say, surely Charlie's showing signs of Quaalude intoxication. You don't have to figure that out, You just have to realize, hey, this person appears to be too impaired to be there, and it doesn't really matter if the person's too fatigued to be there, or too sick to be there, or too drunk to be there, or too high. If they're too impaired for whatever reason to be able to perform their duty safely, you want to get them off the job, right? And that's your responsibility. So I just want to take one little load off your shoulders. That feel better? All right. Besides the red glassy eyes, what are some other indicators that you may look for?
Their eyes aren't open.
Sure, absolutely. Closed eyes. And I'm going to add one little adjunct to this. It could be somebody whose eyes are barely open because they're very drowsy, or they're actually unconscious and their eyes are closed. Either one is a huge red flag. Now, like I mentioned in the employee session, many of those prescription medications right on the label say don't drive, don't operate machinery, may cause dizziness, may cause drowsiness. They even have a drowsy eye on the label. All right? That's one of the major, and particularly with the opiate epidemic that we're dealing with here in Ohio, that's certainly an indication that an indicator you really want to keep your eyes on. If a person is nodding off, if they're nodding out, if they can't keep their eyes open in the middle of a conversation, that's a huge, huge red flag. And of course, if their eyes are closed so let me come back to that in a moment. Let me ask you a question though about the drowsy eyes. Say you're committing to engaging with your workers at the beginning of your shift. You pull your workers together, you're going over your marching orders, and as you're going over the marching orders with one of your workers, you recognize that you see that he's nodding out. Okay, and so you, in your mind, would that qualify as a indicator that this person may not be okay to continue?
It may.
It might, right? It should. All right. So, what would you say to a worker who was nodding off when you were giving them marching orders?
Okay.
Sure. Are you okay? Are you all right?
Yeah.
Charlie, you with me? Hey, I need 100% of Charlie here. You with me? And that'd be a very normal response, right? Now, let me give you a little bit more information, a little bit more background information. Say that Charlie is a good worker. You've known him for a long time. You knew him even before he started working for you. And Charlie, as far as you know, is almost a non-drinker. I mean, the only booze that you're aware of him drinking was a champagne toast at his wedding 5 years ago, you know. And he doesn't take any drugs, as far as you know. But Charlie has a newborn at home who's colicky. And the baby's been giving him fits, right? And so as soon as you call on Charlie, he becomes all apologies. It's like, oh, anyway, he goes, oh man, I'm so sorry. You know, no disrespect, of course. He goes, you know, but Maggie, she's just, you know, she's giving us fits. You know, Susan, she's been a saint. She gets up with her every night, you know, and she's been great. But it was just my turn last night, you know. And you know, generally I can get up, I can rock her, I can get her to sleep. Last night she wasn't having it, you know, and I probably got an hour and a half of sleep. I hate to ask this of you, but you know, can I take 5 minutes, just go to the restroom, splash some water in my face, get a cup of coffee, just get my juices flowing? Once I do, I'll be okay. Would that be a reasonable accommodation to make for an otherwise good employee?
Yeah.
In your mind? How many of you say it would? I think the overwhelming majority of the folks that we train, I would say yeah, and they would make they would give them a shot, give them a chance to go and drink some coffee and wake up and whatever. Sometimes it's enough, sometimes it's not. But say you do. Say that you give them a shot. All right. You say, I'll tell you what. I'm checking in with people. I need to talk to Henry anyway. Why don't you go ahead and grab a quick cup of Joe, splash some water in your face. Let's rendezvous back here in 5 minutes, and we'll pick it up where we left off. He goes over and talks to the other worker. 5 minutes goes by. Comes back to the rendezvous point, waiting for the other worker. The worker doesn't come back. And so you go look for him. You go to the break room, and there when you walk in, there's Charlie with his head down on the table, a steaming cup of coffee at his head, a little puddle of drool where he's like study hall where he's falling asleep, you know, and you know he's facing directly at the door of the restroom. So you walk in and you see this scene, and you clear your throat to get his attention. Charlie doesn't wake up. Clear your throat louder to get his attention. He still doesn't wake up. So you knock on the table. Suddenly, Charlie bolts to alertness. Says, you know, wakes up. Says, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I was just waiting for the bathroom to wake up to open up, and I must have nodded off. I just need 2 minutes to run in there. I'll be right back out." Okay. At this point, has anything changed?
Yes.
And if so, what?
He needs to go home.
What's changed in your mind?
His second chance, that chance for that day to be okay. Actually, it never changed, because when he said he got an hour's worth of sleep, and
Yeah.
he's doing a job that requires him to be well rested, then he needs to go home.
Absolutely, and I would agree. I think I probably threw too much of a caveat in there for you. But yeah, I think that at least it went for sure from
And it's
being
not a negative. That's
Right.
not a negative on
Sure.
his behalf.
Absolutely. No, he was admitted to it. He was honest about it. I think that in that situation, he's gone from being mildly fatigued, potentially, to certainly to confirm being heavily fatigued. In that situation, then you can't allow him to continue ethically.
But do you allow him to drive home?
Right. And you can't. You know.
We can't allow them.
You can't allow. You have to
Can't,
get him a ride home. You know. And so this is a situation. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has done wonderful research on this, and they've done studies where they took control groups. They took one control group and they fed them shots of liquor until they were legally drunk, and had them go and drive a controlled course with like a driver's ed car where they had another driver in the car, and had them do maneuverability and obstacles and all that. And then they took another control group, and they had them then come back, and they kept them awake long enough until they started showing the signs of psychomotor impairment consistent with heavy fatigue, and they had them perform the same course. And guess, consistently in test after test after test after test, guess which group performed better?
The drunks.
The legally drunk drivers consistently perform better than the heavily fatigued drivers. So if you extrapolate that to your workplace, and you realize that a heavily fatigued worker is likely more impaired than a legally drunk worker, can you, in good conscience, allow them to continue in your workplace? And the answer is always going to be no. All right, so you want to arrange for transportation to get that person home safely. Do you need to write them up for a reasonable suspicion event? No, you treat it like a sick day, get them home, but the next day they come in, you make sure that you counsel the person that that behavior is unacceptable. You know, and this is not a out of left field. They know they've got this newborn is not a surprise. You know, even the colicky, you know, even the colicky behavior is not a surprise. So they need to take protective measures to make sure that when they report for work that they're fit for duty. And if they can't do that, then they need to maybe make some other arrangements, work a different shift, maybe take a short-term leave, whatever they have to do. But you can't have this day after day where they're coming in, they're too impaired, you're sending them home. You've got a production schedule, it would be too disruptive. All right, that makes sense? All right. With the closed eyes, and this is particularly, this can be a particularly scary event, and I want you to be aware of this. This is happening more and more frequently. Many workers, and this shouldn't happen, but according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, approximately 40% of approximately 20% of U.S. workers are abusing prescription medication, particularly opioid prescription medication. They're misusing or abusing it. They're taking it other than having a prescription. This is not to mention those folks who have a legal prescription for it, who are taking it as prescribed. So the extrapolation for this, the projection is that approximately 40% of U.S. workers are actually taking some form of controlled substance prescription medication when they're on the job. Of those folks that are taking those medications, many of them are sometimes supplementing the medication they get from their doctor with some kind of medication that they've bought on the black market. They've run short, they buy a couple pills here, a couple pills there, and so some of those individuals are taking those counterfeit medications, and they're running into some of those dangerous those dangerous counterfeit opioid medications that I talked about during the employee session, and they're overdosing on shift. And let me give you a situation that you may be able to relate to. Have you ever known anybody who was at a party or at a restaurant who started choking on snacks, or on a hot dog, on something, pretzel? What do those folks normally do? What's a very common behavior when they start choking? Do they automatically start doing the universal sign for choking?
Yeah.
What's the common response to it?
Excuse yourself.
Yeah, and a lot of times they excuse themselves. They step away because they're embarrassed.
Right.
Because we're taught that we're supposed to, we're conditioned, we're supposed to, have good manners and chew our food properly, and if we wolfed it down and it's not going down properly, then that's our fault. And so a lot of times those folks will go to a restroom and they'll try to gag it up or wash it down, flush it down, one or the other. And because they've gone and they've isolated themselves, if they're unsuccessful about their attempt to clear their airway, what happens? They go unconscious and they die. A very similar thing often happens when it comes to them taking these counterfeit tablets. They take the medication, they start feeling sick, they start feeling nauseous and sweaty and hot and overwhelmed. And and their instinct isn't to go tap their supervisor on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I think that pill that I just took is kicking my rear end." Instead they go somewhere remote and they try to pull themselves together. They'll go to a car, they'll go to the restroom, they'll go to a storage room or something where they can try to pull themselves together. And because their system is so overwhelmed by the dosage that they've taken, that they can't pull themselves back together. It just gets worse and worse until it's potentially lethal. By the way, does anybody know why opioid drugs cause death?
It slows. It doesn't stop. It slows.
Slows what?
It slows your heart.
It slows your breathing, actually.
Oh, breathing.
It stops your breathing. The reason why we breathe is because when we contract our diaphragm, we inhale oxygen. We have oxygen-rich blood in our bloodstream. As the oxygen depletes, it causes us to feel a little sensation of pain. It's not anything it's not incredibly painful, but it's enough discomfort that it causes us involuntarily to draw another breath. So that little bit of a pain response causes us to breathe, and it's involuntary. We do it without thinking. When a person takes a really, really large dose of opiates, it overrides that pain. It numbs that pain response from breathing, and so we don't feel the need to breathe. We stop breathing, and then our respiratory emergency leads to a cardiac arrest, and we expire. All right. So we have and so if you find somebody with their eyes closed, somebody who is unconscious, then it's important that you respond quickly, that you call 911, get them on the way. Don't try to transport the person yourself to the hospital, because they can generally, 911 can dispatch somebody local closer, can get to you faster than you can get to them. And when they show up, they're going to show up with those life-saving medications that maybe can bring the person out of it. Although sometimes there's not much that can be done at all. All right. One other thing with the eyes that I want to mention are pupils. Your pupils are one of the survival mechanisms in our bodies is our pupils will adjust to the light value of our environment. If it's too dark, the pupils will expand to let in extra light so that we can see hazards. If it's too bright, the pupils will constrict to filter out the light so it doesn't overstimulate our optic nerve. And so there are certain medications that a person can take that will stop our pupils from being responsive. And fixed pupils, whether they're fixed in pinpoint or fixed and dilated, either way can be a big red flag. Right now with the opiates, I'm not going to get into all the different medications, lots of them can cause different responses. But with opiates, whether you're talking about heroin or the prescription painkillers, when a person is strung out on those, their pupils will be tiny in pinpoints. So it doesn't matter, even if you block the light, they're not going to expand. They'll be tiny in pinpoint. And that can be a big red flag. If you haven't seen it, there's a fantastic documentary that I recommend for folks to check out. It was produced by HBO. It was award-winning. It's called Heroin Cape Cod, USA. Have any of you seen it? It's incredible. Wouldn't you say? It's an amazing video. It's about 76 minutes, and I've probably watched 100 hours of documentaries about heroin and different drugs, and this is by far the best I've ever seen. It follows around a group of 20-something-year-old kids from good families who had good protective factors in place. They were all honor students, had after-school jobs, were involved in extracurricular activities, had dinners together every night, had involved parents. I mean, all the things you would expect that would set them up for success. And all these kids ended up getting hooked on heroin. And so it follows those kids around, shows what they're going through, shows the impact it's having on the family, on the community. They interview pharmacists and first responders and ER doctors, and it's amazing. But one thing that I took away from it that was really, really good was noticing those indicators of impairment, particularly the pinpoint pupils. As much as I've interacted with impaired workers or impaired individuals, as much as I've watched these videos, for whatever reason, watching this documentary, when I walked away, I had even a better understanding than I did going in. And I'm sure if you're starting off with a pretty clean slate, it'll be really valuable for you. Right? Besides the eyes and odors and speech, is there anything else you can think of?
Staggering.
Yep, staggering. Coordination. Right? Coordination. If the person is stumbling, staggering, having to hold onto furniture or walls or banisters to steady themselves when they move from place to place, dropping things, breaking things, having a spike in accident or injury rates, all those things are indicators. And then what we would call other obvious signs. All right? And with other obvious signs, if the person's standing on the porch, it could be somebody standing there with a can of beer. Hey dude, you want a cold one? Or standing there with their old college bong, saying, hey dude, it's 4:20 somewhere. I got a bag of nugs. Whatever. It could be other more disturbing things. Needle marks on their arms, on the vein lines. It could be the presence of different drug paraphernalia. Got a couple of things I'd like to show you. I brought along a couple of props. substance abusing workers are often very sneaky about hiding what they're doing. There are fake cans that where they use legitimate cans, and they put a cooler inside that will keep it airtight, and so it won't be detectable even if somebody's walking a dog through or whatever. I'll pass this around. But they use these with soda cans, with shaving cream containers, with WD-40 where they have the false bottom on them. But it's really interesting. I'll pass it around.
Can you really not smell vodka?
Of course, you can still smell vodka. Yeah,
everyone says you can't smell
no,
vodka.
it's a wives' tale.
Okay.
With vodka,
I gotta know.
the chemical that's secreted when a person has been consuming alcohol. It's called acetaldehyde, and that's what we determined to smell like. Somebody smells like booze. That's what they're exhaling. Also, I have here a little bong. This is a water pipe. Just to give you, if you've heard the term, or you weren't sure what it was. That's very common. And also, I have a bag here of catnip that this kind of resembles, a bag of green vegetable matter. So if you see somebody with passing off bags of whatever, then that could tip you off to what's them doing something they shouldn't be doing. You may notice them having rolling papers, particularly rolling papers that are stuffed down into their cigarette pack. Would that be a red flag for you?
They're not rolling cigarettes, but they're smoking.
Right. If they've got a pack of rolled cigarettes, they shouldn't have the rolling papers there. These are hemostats, and I have these that are deliberately burned on the end. These are used to hold the marijuana, the joint or the marijuana cigarette. I'm seeing these in their gear, having pill bottles with the label removed. Any idea why the label might be removed? Why that might be a red flag?
Might have been someone's prescription
theirs.
other than theirs.
Yeah, because it's not there, because they don't want to take this off before they sell it, because if somebody gets caught with it, they don't want them to trace it back to them. I also have, if they have little vials full of powder, this has baby powder in it, but it gives you an idea. This is a little vial that has that can be unscrewed and has the little spoons so they can sniff the stuff. I've had folks who, we had an individual who got referred to us because he pulled out his keys in front of his supervisor and the vial fell out and bounced around on the floor in front of him. Different types of vials. Here's just a long vial for more content, smaller vial that has some mechanism where you can turn this and do it without opening it up. Crazy. And then you've got little folded envelopes. These are called bindles that are used to contain the different powders, whether it's cocaine or heroin or whatever. If you're seeing these little folded envelopes lying around your job site, that can be a big red flag. Seeing the corner of a sandwich bag that's been cut out or torn off, and seeing those lying around on the floor, see those lying around in the trash in the trash cans, or sometimes those you'll walk in behind a person in the bathroom stall, and you'll see the corner of the baggie floating in the water. And what happens is that's a place where a lot of times people will go to use their drugs. And so after they've finished off whatever powder's in there, they'll throw it in the toilet, go to flush it, and when it flushes, the current coming back out catches the plastic, and so it's like a jellyfish floating there when you come in, and that's a good indication the person before you may have been using those drugs. And unfortunately, you may see people popping pills out of cigarette cellophanes instead of the pill bottle. You may see folks popping pills that they've had folded up in tissues, taking the pills out and snapping them in half before they take them. Any idea why that might be a red flag? Because
faster.
Yep, they're snapping the pills so that they get into the system more quickly. Those are often
Tablet?
the tablets have time release on them, and so the stomach acid is supposed to dissolve one level at a time, and so as it has a protective coating. The acid eats that off, and then a little bit of medication is released. Then it eats the stomach acid eats the next level. If you break them in half, it's all released at once. so it gets into the system more quickly. You also may see them taking, you also may notice the syringes laying around, or pieces, parts of syringes. The caps, the cap that goes over the plunger, these are commonly referred to as top hats. So you see the little top hats lying around on the floor in the bathroom, whatever. A lot of times a person will have injected, left the piece of parts around, they can't find them, and they're goofed up on the medication anyway, so they are on the drugs anyway, so they can't find the pieces, and they just say forget it and they move on. Then you may find just the whole syringe lying in a trash can or lying in a bathroom or whatever. And if you're finding those syringes lying around, it doesn't matter if a person's giving themselves medically necessary injections or not. There's no good reason to leave them around. There's a very specific protocol for how to dispose of them. You're supposed to keep them in there, keep them in a Ziploc bag inside of like a zippered pouch, and take them home and dispose of them in a sharps container. And dispose of them as biohazard material. If they're just finding the syringes lying around, that's an indication they're being misused. Right? And then looking for large cans, similar to these large iced tea cans or large energy drinks. These larger cans often have a larger mouth opening, and these are often used as impromptu sharps containers. So somebody will leave a container like this, like in the behind a toilet or in a storage room, in a tool room or whatever, and that's where they go in and they inject. They put their syringe in there, throw paper towel or whatever over it, and then at the end of the day they'll go by, pick up the bottle or the can, walk out with it, and nobody's the wiser. And so we found some of those in different job sites over the years still. Right, so other indicators that can tip you off: obvious attendance problems, missing on payday, and missing. So how do you receive your paychecks? Do you get paper checks or electronically? You get direct deposit, and what day are they direct deposited? Fridays. All right. Very commonly, what we see, and if you start having attendance problems with your workers, you may notice the problem that they miss Fridays and Mondays, and that related to their payday. And that's because it goes back into the compulsive use of the substance when they have money. It has to do with their cash flow. That when they get paid, they're flush with money, and so they go hog wild on the booze or drugs. After the first weekend, a lot of times they're really cash strapped, but they have a little bit. By the middle of the second week, they're broke. A lot of times they have borrowed all the money they can borrow from people. They've already maxed out their beer tab at the bar. They've already gotten as much as they can get from their dealer. Their ATM is already NSF. They have non-sufficient funds, so they can't get any more money out of that. And so they have forced abstinence from booze or drugs for that period of time. They have several days where they can't get anything. So when they know that their check is getting ready to hit, then they sit at the ATM. It hits at 12 o'clock. At 12:01, they withdraw funds, and they get their first dose of the drug that they have had or the booze that they have had in days. And their intention may be just to use just use a little bit just to take the edge off of things. But unfortunately, because they're not starting until midnight, they get carried away, and before long they're looking at the clock saying, man, I have to be at work in a couple hours. So then what do? Call off, okay? So now they've got an extra day off, it's party time, right? So now they've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where they're going on, Friday, at least Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, where they're on a bender. Sunday, they're getting the hair of the dog just to not feel terrible, all right? But then they go to sleep and wake up on Monday feeling awful, so what do? Again? Call off, So if you look at a 12-month calendar and you circle the days when they miss, the patterns are so apparent a lot of times that it's impossible to miss. You may also notice unexcused absences from when they're on shift, where they take off and they disappear and they're incommunicado. maybe how long are your lunch breaks?
In the warehouse?
Half an hour.
hour.
Half an hour? All right, so say they've got 30 minutes, and they start employing junkie math. That's what it's my own patented term, junkie math. And they think, you know what, maybe they've been without their pills for a day or two. They're starting to really go into withdrawal. And they're at work, and they're expecting to go and get more medication, or supposed to go get more pills after work. But they get a text that says, in the morning, that says, hey, it's all good. I've gotten a new supply, come by and see me after work. And they say, after work, my hind end, I think I can make it at lunchtime. So they start doing the math and the calculations to say, you know what, my dealer is 15 minutes from here. If I get right there and get right back, then I'll be able to take a couple pills on the way, and I'll feel fine by the afternoon, and it'll all be great. And so they leave, and they take off. When they get there, though, and they find out that the guy's not there, that he's run out, and he'll be right back. And so he's sitting there with money and waiting for the drugs, and really, really wants them. And so they wait, and now they're going to be late, but they don't want to leave, and so they can't call in and say that what's going on, because they don't know how long they're going to be there, but they don't want to leave without it. And so maybe that half-hour lunch turns into an hour, and you start seeing those patterns happening over and over again. We had a superintendent who was from an Akron company who was working on a Cleveland job site, and they had LoJack GPS in their fleet of trucks. And they noticed that he just kept he was incommunicado a lot, which was just, and people had other concerns too. And they started noticing the GPS pattern that he was detouring. He was going to Akron. He was going to Cleveland from Akron via Youngstown. So he would leave Akron, go to Youngstown, go to Cleveland. And this was happening commonly. And it turned out that the GPS point where he was going to was a particular restaurant where he was buying his heroin. And so that's how they got tipped off. That's how they had their intervention. Okay. Sometimes it can be interpersonal conflicts with other workers. And let me say this as a preface: sometimes people are just jerks. There's no cure for that, and sometimes there's not always a cure for it. But sometimes, the substance use can cause real spikes and real mercurial behavior one way or the other. Where where sometimes they can be really easygoing, sometimes they can be really over the top aggressive, and so sometimes when you're having a spike in interpersonal conflicts, that can be a red flag for you too. All right. Anything else you can think of? Okay. Bottom line, front porch test is what I'm going to call it. How long is it going to take you to recognize that person is impaired on the other side of the screen door?
Seconds.
Seconds, moment, certainly less than a minute, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it. All right. So once step one is observe, step two is investigate, step three is going to be confirm. You're not going to be out on a limb by yourself having to make this determination, having to be solely responsible for it. It's not going to be your word against the worker. The third step in this process is to confirm. You want to get another trained supervisor to come in and give you a second set of eyes to make this determination together. Okay? And there are 3 steps to the confirmation process. The first step is to contain the suspected individual. You want to get them out of harm's way so they don't hurt themselves or someone else. So you say, Charlie, do you have a second? I need to talk to you. And you take them to a safe place where they can sit for a moment while you pull your things together. Step 2 is going to be communicate. We want to communicate with another confirmed supervisor, or with another trained supervisor. Get them on their way to you to give you a second set of eyes. So you want to get once you have the suspicion, you call another supervisor. Hey, Susan, I need you to come meet me in the conference room. I got a potential reasonable suspicion event with Charlie. All right, and then you ask the other supervisor to notify your designated employer representative. This will be your program administrator, to let them know that this is going on. The program administrator will always want to be in the loop. All right, so make sure that you have that you designate the other supervisor to please let them know what's going on. All right, and then the 3 of you, once the other supervisor arrives, you're going to take the suspected individual to your conference room or to your designated area, and you want to conduct what we call a small room test. So the three of you are together, the suspected worker and the two supervisors, and you conduct what we call a small room test. Now the small room test is just an informal conversation that the two of you are going to have with this worker to determine whether or not this person is in fact or appears to be too impaired to safely perform their duties. All right? And what we recommend is that in order to make this go smoothly, that you just ask the person open-ended questions that have to do with the job that they're currently working on, the job they just finished, or the job they're about to begin. All right. Realistically, can all of you within a minute or two think of a couple of questions you can ask somebody about the job that they're currently conducting? All right. And you want to do that because you want this interaction to seem more natural. Now if you call them up, if you pull them off the floor and you bring them to a conference room and you sit down and just start making small talk, is that going to seem odd? Absolutely. And what's going to happen to their defenses? It's going to go through the roof, right? So you call them in and you want to ask them questions about what's going on at the job. So Charlie, how are things going? Are you running into any snags? How's this going? How's that going? And then you talk to them for a minute or two, and then both of you are observing and you're looking to see if they're displaying any of these indicators of impairment. Okay? And remember, just like on the porch, if you can pick up these indicators on the porch, you can pick them up on your shift. How long did it take you on the porch? A couple of seconds, right? How long is it going to take you when you're sitting there interacting with this person? Probably about the same amount of time. Right? Then once the two of you have had enough time to determine whether or not this person is in fact showing signs of impairment, once you think you've seen enough, then you want to politely excuse yourselves. Hey Charlie, I want you to go ahead and have a seat. I need to talk to Susan for a minute. I'll be right back. And the two of you should step outside of the room, and you want to position yourselves just far enough away where you can discuss this privately, but so that at least one of you can maintain visual observation of the door to the room where the person's sitting. Why is that so important? Yeah, you want to make sure the person doesn't leave the room and walk out in front of a truck or something, right? You want to make sure that they're safe. They're suspected of being impaired, but you don't want them to get hurt or hurt anybody else, right? So you just want to keep an eye on the door. Then you want to ask each other whether or not you think there's enough there to warrant impairment. Now remember, going back to the beginning of this session, what are those guidelines? What are the standards for impairment? Do you have to be 100% certain that the person's impaired before you can pull the trigger? No, certainty is not required. Is a vague gut feeling or a hunch, is that enough? No, a hunch will not suffice. All right? Certainty is not required, a hunch is not sufficient. You must be able, though, to verbalize and articulate why it is you believe this person is too impaired to safely perform their duties. So you want to ask each other, so what are you seeing? One of you may say, well, he appears to be, he sure had a strong odor of alcohol. It's a good thing nobody lit a match in there, could have blown out the windows, Somebody else may say, well, he sure had red glassy eyes, he could barely keep his eyes open. Somebody else may say, well, he was slurring his words, he seemed offensive and, confused. Another one may say, well, he sure seemed unsteady on his feet, he almost fell down trying to sit down in that chair. At this point, based on those observations, is that enough? Yeah, I'd say absolutely. That would be almost a slam dunk, right? That would be certain. So at that point, you want to pull the trigger on it. And just one more thing. What's the bare minimum number of indicators you need to be able to pull the trigger on one of these referrals? One. Good job. Yes, exactly one indicator. And I'll give you a scenario that you'll never forget. Say that you're coming back from lunch and you are headed to the restroom urgently. And so you run into the room and you throw open the bathroom stall door, and there you see a worker with his belt around his arm and a syringe in his hand. Is that one indicator going to be enough?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? So one can be plenty. So once you come to that conclusion, now once you pull the trigger on this, once you make that decision, there's no putting the gun back in the bullet. Once you make the decision, you're going to go with it. They can't talk themselves out of it. Once you make that determination, one of you should be designated to notify your program administrator or your designated employer representative that you need to proceed with the testing. And then once the designated employer representative has been notified, then the two of you should re-enter that room as a united force. And you're going to go in, and it's going to take you to step 4 to confront the individual. Now, if you're writing anything on your notes, right next to where it says step 4, confront, I would ask you to write in parentheses the word notify. All right? Because again, this is based on the Code of Federal Regulations. I don't want to change any of the steps there, but just the connotation that goes along with confront is very aggressive. Really, what you need to do is notify the worker about what needs to happen next. And so you want to stay focused on the policy that you're basing this recommendation on, not on the person involved. And say, Charlie, as you probably already figured out, the reason why we called you aside is because we have reason to believe that you may be in violation of our substance abuse policy. In accordance with that policy, we now need to refer you for reasonable suspicion testing. Do you agree to be tested? And Charlie will either consent or refuse. Now, if he refuses, then it's your responsibility to remind Charlie that as a condition of the agreement that he signed, that he's required to comply with the testing required of this program. If he doesn't go for the testing, then it's going to be grounds for termination. However, if he goes for the test, even if he tests positive, there may be a track for rehabilitation. All right? And then it's going to be up to him. Now, when given those options, the worker almost always says, okay, I'll go. And if the employee consents to testing, then it's going to be your responsibility to transport, as a supervisor, to transport him to the collection site, or at least to follow your company transportation protocols. Now, if it's your responsibility as a supervisor to transport, I want to throw one caveat out there, one qualifier that you always have to keep in mind. Again, something to write down. Only ever transport that worker if you're confident you can do so safely. Only ever transport if you're confident you can do so safely. If the employee appears to be overdosing, and losing consciousness, then for God's sake, call the ambulance, get them on the way. Let them do the transport. If the person appears to be agitated, like you think they might attack you or do something crazy, like try to jump out of the vehicle, don't take that chance, call an ambulance, let them transport. They have enough staff to make sure that they're safe. But if the person is remorseful and appears to be contrite and docile, then you can do the transportation. Once they've agreed to go, then the two of you should escort them to their vehicle so that they can secure it. Ask them to roll up the windows, lock the doors so they can't say somebody put something in their vehicle or somebody took something out of it. And then one of you, same sex, should transport them to the collection site. All right? And while you're en route, actually before you're en route, once you've notified your program administrator, if you're taking them to a collection site, and other than like a hospital because they can't make these accommodations, but if they're taking them just to a collection site, then the supervisor can call the head and generally get the patient in the testing queue, get the employee in the testing queue. So so by the time they arrive, then they're next in line. All right, does that make sense? So that way you're not getting there, signing in, and sitting there twiddling your thumbs with an uncomfortable silence for 15, 20 minutes while you're waiting on them to call you. When you get there, they're going to ask to see a picture ID of the employee. If the employee doesn't have a picture ID, you as an agent of the corporation, as a supervisor, you can provide visual verification that they are who they say they are. And then they're going to take them back. They're going to conduct, your program administrator will have already told them that they need to be tested for alcohol and drugs. They'll tell them what it'll be a 7-panel drug screen for companies who are enrolled in the drug-free safety program. And while they're working on that, then that gives you an opportunity to complete your reasonable suspicion form. May I borrow your reasonable suspicion form for a moment? Sure. Your form will look like this. It's a standard reasonable suspicion form. This is also known as a 60-second report form. Any guesses why it might be called that?
It takes 60 seconds to fill out.
Gold star. It takes approximately a minute to fill it out. It's very self-explanatory, but it covers all 6 steps of the 6-step constructive confrontation process. You want to fill this out while you have a moment there, while it's still fresh in your mind. And then when the employee, thank you very much, when the employee comes out from the testing area, he or she may be excitable, and they may try to tell you what the results were for their evidentiary breath test, for their breathalyzer, because they'll have those results right then. A lot of times they'll come out, they'll be agitated, say, these people don't know what they're doing, they say I'm still blowing a point, but stop them in their tracks. That's really none of your business. That test result information is considered confidential medical information. If you don't know it, you can't be accused of spreading it. To stop them in their tracks and say, you know what, stop right there, that's really between the medical staff, if there's, and the medical review officer, who's a doctor who will review those tests. If there's anything that they need to know, they will notify the management. But right now, my responsibility is to get you home safely, and that's really what you want to focus on. And remember, you always want to take them home from the collection site. You know, you don't want to bring them back to the workplace, because you don't want them to have access to their vehicle, and you don't want them to come back here and start making a big disturbance. All right. So you want to ask them. You know, my job is to get you home safely from here. Is there someone that we can call to get you home safely? A lot of times they'll suggest their significant other. They'll call their husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or a buddy, or whatever. If they can get there in a reasonable amount of time, 10, 15, 20 minutes, then sit with them, wait for them to get picked up. When they get picked up, write down the time that their ride arrived, the license plate number of the vehicle they left in, and take a picture of the person on with your cell phone of them getting in the vehicle and leaving. And all of that will then be included with the reasonable suspicion form that you submit to your HR manager. Now, if there is nobody that you can pick up, what we recommend is that you download an Uber app for your phone. How many of you have an Uber app on your phone? Okay. If you don't, please check it out. It's amazing, it's simple, it's inexpensive, and it's perfectly suited for this type of situation, because it is pinpoint GPS focused. And so when you order the Uber, the driver will pick them up exactly where you want to be picked up, and you will have typed in already the person's home address to where they're going. And so when they get picked up, you're going to have records of where they're picked up, where they were dropped off, the driver, their license plate number. You have all that information that's sent to you as part of your Uber receipt. It's perfect for this. And the drivers are not legally allowed to take that person anywhere other than where they've consigned the ride to go. So now once they get there, they can hire them to take them somewhere else, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to make a reasonable effort to get them from point A to point B. Right? And again, once they get picked up, write down the time, license plate number, take the picture. Now, if there is no one to pick them up, there's no cab, there's no Uber, there's no significant other, and you may be in a situation where you need to drop them off, you have to drop them off, as long as you can do so safely, again, and take them to their house. When they walk in, snap a picture of them going into their house, again, so you have proof. That will be time stamped and GPS stamped with your cell phone. All that information's on the picture. All right, and then go back and turn all this information in the same day the incident occurs. All right. Now, if the individual refuses, they say, "Forget you. I'm not going for your test." You say, "Look, if you don't go for the test, you're going to lose your job. You've been a good worker for a long time. Why don't you reconsider?" They say, "Look, you know what, I've been tired of working here for a long time, you take this job and shove it," then at that point, don't beg them, just pivot. Say, "You know what, although I sure wish you'd reconsider, if this is your decision, I'll respect it, but it's my responsibility to make sure that you leave the premises safely. I can't allow you to continue any longer. Is there someone you can call to come pick you up?" Say, "Look, I'm not calling anybody, You say, "Look," say, "No problem. We have an Uber app, or we have a relationship with a local taxi cab company. I want you to go ahead and have a seat in my office. We'll order you a ride. When they get here, we'll let you go. We'll pay for it and everything. We just want to make sure you get home safely." He says, "Look, I don't want your Uber. I don't want your taxi. I'm not calling anybody. I'm not going for your stupid test. I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to walk myself out that door. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to drive myself home. If you try to stop me, I'm going to knock you silly." Do you think that actually happens? Absolutely. The two industries that happens most commonly in is manufacturing and construction. So in that situation, I want you to know you have absolutely zero responsibility for putting yourself in harm's way to stop them from leaving. You don't have to tackle them, you don't have to restrain them, you don't have to go lay like a human speed bump behind their vehicle to stop them from pulling out. You are not responsible for putting yourself in harm's way for stopping them. However, under OSHA's General Duty Clause, you are still responsible for maintaining a safe work environment free from identified hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or harm. If you become aware of such a hazard, you're responsible for taking immediate appropriate corrective action to stop you from being hurt or killed. So the immediate appropriate corrective action in that instance is to call 911, notify law enforcement. You call 911 and you give them 3 pieces of information: who you are, where you are, what's going on. Hello, this is Arthur Ritchie. I'm calling from the Carnation Mall here in Alliance, Ohio on West State Street. I'm calling regarding one of my employees, Charlie Johnson. We believe he may be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. He's got a strong odor of alcohol. He's unsteady on his feet, red glassy eyes, becoming confrontational and aggressive. He's insisting on leaving our premises in his own personal vehicle. He's driving a red pickup truck, license plate ABC123. He headed left out of the parking lot. He's heading on west on 62 towards Canton. That point is a timestamp recorded phone call. There's no doubt that you've done what you could do. Now, no matter what happens, it's between Charlie and the police. Now, if God forbid Charlie goes off the road and goes into a ditch, that's on Charlie. If he goes left to center and hits another motorist, that's on Charlie. But if you don't make that call, and he goes off the road and goes into a ditch or goes and causes another accident, if you make the decision, the reckless, willful decision to not make that call, and then he goes out and he gets involved in that accident, then some of that blood will splash back onto you and splash back onto your company. And you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're being asked to answer questions for which there's just no good answer. Okay? You need to make that call, give the law enforcement an opportunity to intercept so they can prevent that accident from happening in the first place. Now, hopefully nothing goes on, hopefully it doesn't cause an accident, but you always want to make that call just in case. Once you've made that call, if you're in a situation where you have to make that police report, please try to have the pleasant presence of mind to write down the police report number. Ask them to fax you a copy of it so that you can submit it along with this report. If there's been a traffic accident, ask for a copy of the accident report. That's a public record. They'll generally fax that for you also. If there's been a violent incident, if there's been a catastrophic injury, then try to get witness statements from anybody who saw it. And when you're collecting the witness statements, try to make sure that you're getting a full name and contact phone number in case you need additional information. Collect all that information, put it together with your cover sheet, with your reasonable suspicion sheet, your 60-second report form sheet on top, and then submit all of that to your program administrator or to your designated employer representative the same day the incident occurs. Okay. Any questions about any of that? And then, this is going to sound crazy, but then try to regroup, pull yourself together. This whole thing from start to finish may have taken 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. But after it's wrapped up, after you've turned your paperwork in, try to pull yourself together and get back to work, because you still have a whole day's work to get done, and all those things that you were supposed to do when you showed up in the morning are still there waiting for you. So try not to let it knock you off your axis, pull yourself together, and get back down to business. Okay. All right. Any questions for me about any of this? Do you feel confident that if one of these incidents occurred that you would know what to do? Okay. Well then, my job here is done. I want to thank you all for your time and your attention. Again, please make sure you've signed in so you get credit for being here, and so you don't have to come back for the midnight session this evening. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate you.
Thank you.